again, the reason why they were so important is because of the um, the preservation that they had during the Dark Ages, right? As civilization totally collapsed with the Roman Empire, um, the monks preserved much of what is left of the culture, right? And particularly, their biggest contribution was their copying of the scriptures, right? To do that job, you pretty much had to be a monk. You have, spend all day sitting in front of a lectern, handwriting the scripture, So, but anyways, so today we're going to talk about the medieval church and where that's going. Okay, what that looks like. It's hard to put an exact date on these things as far as when the medieval church starts to arise. So far, we're at the year at about 600 is roughly where we're at, right? And that, 600 is, we've got the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire is still doing its thing. We've got the acceptance of Christianity by the Eastern Empire. And then, of course, Rome itself, the city itself is now basically under the control of the Bishop of Rome, or as he would start to be called by this point, the Pope. Okay? So, starting off into the Dark Ages and leading into the medieval ages, there's a figure that has to be talked about, and that is Gregory. Okay, Gregory the First. Catholics will call him Pope Gregory. He denied the title of Universal Pope, but he also wouldn't let anyone else take that title either. So it's kind of like, what do you do there? He's also famous. I believe he's famous for his calendar. Isn't that his thing? We still use the calendar that he developed in most of the Western world today. But anyways, he was the Bishop of Rome. We're not going to bog down too much into his story, but long story short, he was born of great wealth. His family had great wealth, and he would decide to donate all that wealth to the church, use it to build some monasteries there in Italy and some abbeys, as they would come to be called, and then he would submit himself as into the system of the church at the time. It says here he was born into one of the old, noble, wealthy families of Rome. Gregory was given a legal education to fit the government service. He studied Latin, literature, and extensively, but he did not know any Hebrew nor Greek. He was familiar with the writings of Jerome and Augustine and Ambrose, but knew little of classical literature or philosophy of Greece. About 570, he was made the prefect of Rome, which is like a political position. I'll get that for you. I got it. Okay, now I'll drop my phone. Okay, fine. Sure. All right. Anyways, so he was significantly well educated, just not in the languages of the New Testament. All right. Let's see. It says here, this is kind of interesting note. It says if Augustine became a monk and this is Augustine of Hippo. If Augustine became a monk for intellectual purposes, it is fair to say that Gregory became a monk because he thought asceticism, or asceticism? Help me out. Asceticism, okay, was a way to glorify God. When Pope Pelagius died, by this time they're calling him Pope, all right? He died of the plague in 590. By the way, that's another reason why this is also called the Dark Ages. Bubonic plague has started to show up, and it is a terrible, horrible disease, okay? And Gregory was chosen to take his place, okay? Let's see, where do we want to go here? He expanded the power of the Roman bishop like a whole lot. You asked about Spain. We're going to talk about Spain today. You asked about Spain last week. Yeah, you did. You said what's going on in Spain. Who did? Linda did. Well, Linda's not right there, so. All right. Okay. We're going to talk about Spain, and we're going to talk about, we say Britain, but we need to talk about Ireland and Scotland and England as well, okay? Understand that those places are not formed yet. They're called different things like Northumbria and Kent and all those things. We're just trying to simplify it so we know the geographical locations. But Gregory's influence is really going to absorb the form of Christianity that existed in Britain that was brought there very early on was not exactly submissive to the Roman Catholic Christianity. Gregory is going to make that happen, right? There's going to be a big dispute in Northumbria, and which is basically, we'll just call it England, as to which form of Christianity is going to win that. And long story short, of course, they would fall under what would come to be called Roman Catholicism. Okay. Okay. His greatest work was to expand the power of the Roman bishop. Although he disclaimed the title of pope, he exercised all the power and prerogatives of the later popes. He did assert spiritual supremacy of the Bishop of Rome. So in other words, he said, my say is the final say. He exercised the episcopal power over the churches of Gaul, Spain, and Britain. Gaul is kind of greater France, right? So Gaul includes some of Germany. Let's see, Gaul, Spain, Britain, Africa, and Italy. He appointed bishops and sent the pallium, I don't know what that is, the scarf of office to those who he appointed, and he had made or later made ratified. Okay, so long story short, he really solidified. By the time that Gregory's reign comes to an end, the Roman Catholic Church is a full-grown thing, right? And remember, even though he denied that title of pope, he's the pope, right? And at this point, things are looking pretty dim as far as New Testament Christianity. At this point, we're really starting to say that the observance of the Lord's Supper, we're really starting to get in the doctrine of transubstantiation, which is the idea that when you partake of the Lord's Supper, you're actually eating the body of Jesus and drinking the blood of Jesus. That when the priest blesses it, that it becomes the physical body and the physical blood of Jesus. Like, to the point, take it down to the blood bank and it'll test positive for blood, right? Like literal, not symbolic. None of that. We take it as symbolic. They take it as literal, right? That's going to become a major arguing point as the centuries go on, right? In fact, Luther and Calvin and the Roman Catholic Church of their day are going to have major blow-ups over that too. So anyways, by the time Gregory's reign's coming to an end, the doctrine of transubstantiation, even though it's not exactly titled that yet, it's in place, right? All bishops in the known Christian world submit to the Bishop of Rome for the final decision. And so, yeah. It does say here some interesting things about him other than the terrible things that go along with, becoming pope. His deep interest in missionary work is shown by essentially his work in Yorkshire and Northumbria, right? He commissioned a bunch of monks to go up there and essentially have some scholastic debates with the Celtic form of Christianity that existed up there, and they would win it out, right? Let's see, he made the Bishop of Rome one of the most wealthiest positions in the church of his day because he was an excellent administrator. Remember, he had been educated to be a politician and then kind of an administrator there as well. The papal possessions in Italy and nearby areas had never before yielded such a harvest as they did under Gregory's administration. This money was able to act as a protector for the peace in the West. So in other words, what he's going to do is anytime the southern Italians, known as the Lombards, get in a bad way and they decide to come up here and attack Rome, he would pay someone else to come fight them off and protect the city. That's pretty much summing it up, right? Money talks. He's also the organizer of the Gregorian chant, which is still in place today in Catholic churches. It's just kind of it's a chant. I don't know, how else would you describe it? It is not singing of hymns. I'm sure if you've been in a Catholic church, you've probably heard one. They still do it to this day, which, to a little bit of credit, it is kind of neat to think about that they've been doing that for almost 1,500 years, right? Considering what we're about to get into, which is the turmoil of the Dark Ages that's about to take place. Let's see, he He wrote a commentary on the book of Job. Would not recommend to go read it. You can if you want to. The Catholics like to put him on the same pedestal as Jerome and Augustine and Ambrose, but I would hesitate to do that as a Protestant. Doesn't work that way. Let's see. His reign there is considered the transition point from the time of Constantine and what's going on in the East into early stages of medieval church, what that's going to look like, medieval Roman Catholicism, okay? He's the beginning of it. So, pretty important. There are some things that need to be said about medieval Catholicism. It faced a lot of different things that we don't face today. And medieval Catholicism is different than modern Catholicism, right? We don't have any crusades being called up. But if we did, I bet you they would answer that call, right? There's a bunch of crazy people that would go do it just to go do it. Okay. Now, there is another problem that shows up on the scene. And it shows up, zoom out your Google Maps for me there, Dakota. Keep going, back up, back up. There we go. There's a little something that starts to show up down here in Saudi Arabia involving a big black stone and a guy named Muhammad. Yeah, okay. Muhammad, 570 AD to 632. So at the same time that all this stuff is going on with Gregory, he starts his deal. He obviously is the founder of Islam, and the work itself, let's see, the book gave a pretty good description of Islam. Maybe I can find it for you. Well, let's just talk about Muhammad's early life, and you two may know enough to chime in here if you want to, Michael and Rebecca. But he started off kind of as a heretical preacher, I guess you could say. Not necessarily of the gospel, but of monotheism. So we're at least in that vein where we're monotheistic and not polytheistic. And he kind of started that in Mecca. And long story short, they ran him off. So get out of here with that. That's heresy. The date that he's moved off, I didn't have my highlighter when I was reading all this today, so you're going to bear with me a little bit. It is significant because Muslims still celebrate it today in their calendar. He was forced to flee in 622 to Medina from Mecca, okay? And by the way, they were already worshiping the big black rock over there in Mecca too, okay? The year of this flight is known as Hegira? 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 Yeah, okay, I don't know. But anyways, it becomes the first year of the Muslim calendar, okay? So 622 is when the Muslim calendar starts. By 630, the movement had grown so much that Muhammad was able to capture Mecca. 2 years later at the time of his death, his followers were ready to expand to the nearby Arabian Peninsula. So he starts off kind of as a heretical preacher. When that doesn't work out, he becomes a warlord, okay? Don't ever let anyone tell you that Christianity and Islam are the same thing. They are not even close. We do not worship the same God. They're not even close. Muhammad is not even, he is not a prophet. He is not a holy man. He is not a godly man of any type. He's an evil man. Okay? In fact, in his own writings, he marries a child. He marries a 9-year-old, right? And he's a grown man. He's like 30-something, right? Yeah, they still have problems explaining that one today. But keep in mind, that's also why they still practice these same things in the Middle East today as well. Yes? Yeah, there you go. The good old, the Henry VIII approach, right? That's exactly right. Yeah, go ahead. The book is a little bit vague on his life, so that's what I was saying. Chime in. Yes. Yeah.
And although I don't have the sources, illustration information,
Yeah.
it was a movement, right? And that's why they have the crescent.
The crescent, yeah.
Yeah. And so he went to every tribe and says, okay, you will be your God. Forget about the God you're worshiping. You're going to worship my God.
Right, that's,
Together. And so that's basically where he became a warlord. If they didn't, well, he'll kill you.
yeah.
Go to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay?
So that's his monotheism, right? Is one God, your God's not real, our God is, go from there. Yeah. And yes, Islam from its very beginning was spread and is still spread today with the power of the sword, right? Don't ever let anyone tell you that Islam is a religion of peace. That person is ignorant of the history of Islam.
And that's how they take over. And you can see it happening currently in Minnesota and in New York.
Yep. It's a real thing.
They're allowed to or instructed to lie to get to the point where they are a majority in a population so that they can put their law in place.
Yes.
Well, you can, like Europe is a very good test study, right? They get the 3% of the population, oh, we're all happy, we're all friendly, we're all this and that. And then when they get up to about 7%, that's when all the rapes start happening. And they start doing their business of taking over forcibly.
Yep.
And then when they get up to about 15%, then they take over the political system.
Yep.
And you can see that all through Europe, France,
New York
I
City,
mean, like England.
New York, yeah.
And then now you see it in our country.
Ohio,
That's it. Yeah, I mean, so it's a definitely, it shows up on the scene. During Muhammad's lifetime, it's kind of right in this area, and that's kind of the end of it, right? The first jihad would be what they consider, they call that's their holy war, is this dark part, okay? This is the first jihad, which is the Arabian Peninsula, right? Okay. That's gonna happen pretty quick. The second jihad is all the rest of it, okay? The second jihad is going to be, I mean, you're talking massive, from Baghdad to Spain. They spread out, right? And again, as they go, most of the time, the choice is you either convert or we're going to kill you. Every now and then, they would let a city or let a people group, they would leave them alone as long as they paid an exorbitant amount of money to, whatever form of government was established there at the time. But most of the time, it was either convert or die, okay? Remember, we've been talking about Augustine over here. We've been talking about Alexandria over here. We've been talking about Jerusalem. We've been talking about Antioch and how those were so important in the early stages of Christianity and how those people were there. All of those people are North Africa and Middle East. And I don't know if you know this, but if you go to North Africa or Middle East today, you can't even share the gospel without being persecuted or killed. Okay? The reason for that is Islam. Right? The reason for that is Islam. The second jihad would take place, and just to let you know, do you see, I know it's hard to see, there's a little bitty yellow part right there in southern France. That's how far they made it before they were stopped. They made it into southwestern France, coming up through Spain. They were stopped by a man by the name of Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours. Okay? Let me find you the exact, I think it's 720. Give me a minute. I could Google it since I didn't highlight that. 732? Okay, there we go. It's off by 12 years. Close enough. But Charles Martel would stop the Muslim army as it would come through, let's see, I think this is the Pyrenees Mountains, right, in Spain? Yes. They came through the Pyrenees Mountains. He met them here in southwestern France at the Battle of Tours, beat them, and they never again, after that battle, they never crossed back over the Pyrenees Mountains with an army, okay? Now, as we know, Spain is going to become the battlegrounds for Western Christianity against Islam for, what the Reconquista takes 600 years, something like that they're fighting back and forth over Spain before they finally get pushed back here to Morocco across the Strait of Gibraltar, right? So, so one really big thank you we do owe to the French, or their ancestors, I guess, they would be considered Franks at the time before they're called the French, is that they stopped the Muslims. And as we advance into the colonial age, right, once we get past the Reformation and get into the colonial age, we need to be extremely thankful that those countries, which are the colonial powers, which is Spain, France, Great Britain, and the Dutch, that they're not Muslim. Whereas if they were, a very large portion of the world we live in today would be Muslim, much larger than it is now, right? Luckily, those countries were Christianity. I guess we'll call it Christianity, whatever you want to call Roman Catholicism controlled Christianity. Of course, by some of the colonial times, they're Protestants going, but if that had been Muslims hopping on boats and going across the world would be a much darker and more evil place, right? Okay, so that's first jihad and second jihad, all right? Again, we said 732 is the Battle of Tours. Is that what we said, Ray? Yeah, Battle of Tours is 732. That stops the advancement in the west, okay? That's probably one of the most important. Over here in Baghdad, they also set up a massive headquarters for Islam in Baghdad, okay? Just so you know what the old school name for Baghdad is? The biblical name for Baghdad? Same city, different time? Starts with a B. Huh? Babylon. It's Babylon. That's going to become important later on, okay? Go for it. No. Ishmael, yeah. No, so all right, so we didn't talk about what Muhammad actually, the Quran and his, whatever you want to call it. The Quran separates Judaism from Islam starting at Ishmael. They'll say that Ishmael was the son of the promise and not Isaac, right? And so they claim, and of course they can't do this because they're 1,700 years or more removed from Abraham. But Muhammad decided essentially that Ishmael was the child of the promise. And so the promise didn't go through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, so on and so forth, but through Ishmael, and then they go down through that line, right? So that makes them the people of God and not the Jews. That,
A lot of what the Chronicles say that is not history.
yes.
It's contradictory. And when you have scriptures, when you have ancient texts that claim something that goes against history, it should give you a hint that what you're worshiping is not real.
Yes. Here's the description of the Quran real quick. Luckily, I got it right here. It's on page 169, middle paragraph. It says, the main source of the Muslim religion is the Quran. This work, 2/3 the length of the New Testament, is arranged in 114 chapters. The longest chapter comes at the beginning of the book, and the chapters become successfully shorter until the last chapter, which consists of only 3 verses, and it is repetitious and unorganized, right?
It's almost gibberish,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
You have that, and it's like you're walking into a conversation and you really don't know what's happening. So they have these other books that try to explain it.
Right.
But their contention is that we can't really understand it unless we're reading it in Arabic, to us as well as to faithful Muslims.
Huh.
Reading it in Arabic, it's not the true scripture.
How about that? Let me keep reading this for you guys so you get it here. Obviously, the main tenets of Islam, of which we are somewhat familiar, it says belief in one God known as Allah is the central theme of Islam. Allah made his will known through 25 prophets, including biblical characters such as Abraham, Moses, and Christ, but Muhammad was the latest and greatest of these prophets. Muslims deny both Christ's deity and his death on the cross. The religion is fatalistic with its idea of passive submission to the will of Allah. In other words, Allah's will over all, right? This is why we put on suicide vests and blow each other up. After judgment, men will enjoy a rather sensual paradise or face the terrors of hell. Again, if you want to know if a religion is true or false, look at its version of heaven, right? For Muslims, that's their virgins and all that mess. The good Muslims pray 5 times daily, facing towards Mecca. He also recites a creed daily. Fasting and almsgiving are important. The holiest Muslims are those who at least once during their lifetime make a pilgrimage to Mecca. All right? Islam had a marked cultural and religious significance for Western Europe. It assimilated and passed on to Western Europe through Arabic, Spain, and Greek philosophy of Aristotle. okay? I don't know what he's saying there. Yeah, okay. So long story short, Islam is pretty much going to bring the Eastern Church, which is over here, to its knees. And it's also Constantinople, which is right here, in our little landmass right here, is going to serve as the bulwark in the East for centuries to keep Islam from coming across, right? Hey, switch back over to your Google Maps real quick, if you don't mind. Yeah, zoom down on Constantinople. Down, 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 down. So it turns out that these guys weren't very good with boats, right? And so if you're not good with boats, that means you have to go through here. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, is that called Constantinople today? It's called Istanbul. That's because when the Muslims did finally capture it, they renamed it, okay? The sieges of Constantinople, there would be many throughout the centuries, but long story short, it would last well into the medieval time period, towards the end of the Crusader era, before the city would actually fall. The walls are still there. In many places, you can actually go and see them today. 3 layers of walls that you would have to go up. They knew that their survival depended on their ability to defend the city and control the sea. A siege only works if you can completely surround the city. You can't surround a city that has water on one side if you don't control the ocean. So the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines, made sure to be sure to hold on to the control of the navy at the time. This is where the Greek fire would come in, right? That mysterious fire that they couldn't put out once a ship caught fire. They would throw water on it and it'd flare up even more. It had a great deal with them holding on to the city, right? Okay. Yeah, so don't ever let anyone tell you that Islam is a religion of peace. It is not. It's been a religion of murder and conquest from its beginning, okay? Also, know that, go back to our jihad map if you don't mind real quick. All of that happened before the first crusade was called, okay? So by the rest of the time, and Christianity, remember, we're going all the way up to England now, we're going towards Germany. We said it was 732, the Battle of Tours. Christianity loses all of this via conquest 300 years before the first crusade is called. Okay? So we're not going to get quite to the crusades today, but it's quickly getting ingrained into the people's mind at the time that if we don't defend ourselves, we are going to be wiped out. If we don't do something to stop these hordes that are coming at us, we're not going to make it, right? And of course, the Pope in Rome sees this as a major problem because guess what? All of that used to be under his control. And now he has absolutely no authority over there. The Muslims reject him. The Muslims, of course, view him as the head of evil that needs to be exterminated. So, yeah. You can see where Roman Catholicism would very quickly recognize this as a threat that needs to be answered, right? Okay. Let's see, we already kind of talked about Northumbria, 635, as far as the Celtic form of Christianity being overtaken by the Roman form of Christianity. Yeah. One thing that's interesting is that Patrick, St. Patrick, the guy we always talk about, the clover guy, all that, green dude, okay? So his form of Christianity that he would have been preaching and teaching would have been the Celtic form of Christianity. It would not have been, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's certainly not near as flawed as medieval Roman Catholic Christianity, okay? Again, his explanation for the Trinity is pretty great. Okay, Scotland is won by a monk by the name of Columba in 593, right? And then, yeah, so we have Scotland, Ireland, and Wales are come completely under control by the end of 600 of the Roman Catholic Church. Put us back on our Google map again, if you don't mind. All right, zoom back up so we can see the whole of modern Europe. Up, up, up. All right, go down so we can see North Africa too. There you go. Okay. So as we're looking at our map here, Christianity gets exterminated pretty quickly here, right, by Islam. But what it's going to do is it's going to push further up into here. And remember, the Vikings in Norway and Sweden, that was sort of accidental, provincial, whatever you want to call it, as the Vikings took monks as captives and slaves. The monks used that as an opportunity to evangelize and to preach the gospel. And so, of course, the Vikings would submit to Christianity and eventually Roman Catholicism. All right? We got any other questions real quick while we're doing all this? We're looking at a big, pretty map. So as Christianity gets pushed out of the south, it's really going to start to push more into the north up here, okay? And it's not from a lack of trying to go back south. It's just that every attempt they made kept getting squashed out by Islam, right? By the way, if you ever want to know if a Muslim is radical or not, it's real easy. Ask them one question. Do you think Sharia law should be the law of the land? And they will answer yes. Even if you find a moderate one that just, doesn't do his 5 prayers a day and hadn't gone to Mecca or nothing like that, they will still tell you that they think Sharia law should be the law of the land. Yes?
Something that comes up on this year's vote, FYI.
I did see that, yeah. On the ballot, there's a thing that, what was it? Should we outlaw Sharia law or something?
Yeah, should we allow Sharia law to be a part of Texas?
And the answer to that is no. Of course not. Yeah. Sharia law is literally the oppression of Christians until they convert, if you want to sum it up. Yeah, everyone, yeah, you can do that. Do what? No, what'd you say? Oh, okay. Do what? Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Islam and their tendencies towards women. Yes, and it should be immediately struck down. If the justice system would work as it should, then it would be, right? Like it may be able to survive a district court or a local court, but as soon as it gets to a court of appeals, it should immediately be revoked and repealed and thrown out, right? But that system does not seem to be working quite so well. Okay, so we talked about Gregory, 675, the Lombards who are Arians, right? So they would become Roman Catholic by 675. The Visigoths were the guys in Spain that Linda asked about, not you. Yeah. It says here the Visigoths, they were Arians as well. Let's see, they were a challenge to the Roman Catholic Church. Let's see. In 601, announced at the Third Council of Toledo, there we go, in 589, that he had renounced Arianism, right? So the king of the Visigoths renounces Arianism and submits himself to Roman Catholicism. Yeah, so Spain, by 589, Spain would be considered Roman Catholic, okay? So by 632, what we're looking at is we have, the Visigoths over here. Of course, they're going to get wiped out by the Muslims. We have the Franks. When we're going to talk about Charlemagne here in a minute, they're going to be under the reign of the Roman Catholic Church. This is under the reign of the Roman Catholic Church. Italy's under the reign of the Roman Catholic Church. The Teutons, which are what we're going to call like this area, kind of like Germans-ish, like Germans, Polish-ish, something like that. They are being converted to Roman Catholicism as well. So you really start to see the block of Western Europe start to form under Roman Catholicism, all right? Okay, so now let's talk about the Franks and let's talk about Charlemagne. So one of Charlemagne's ancestors is, of course, Charles Martel, who won the Battle of Tours, stopped Islam. He lived from 714 to 741. 732 is when he defeated the Muslims. He gave reign of that empire, the Frankish Empire at the time, to Pippin, right? Also known as Pippin the Short, or Pippin, what was his name? Yeah, no, Pippin the Great, something like that. Lots of greats around at this time. Anyways, Pippin, yeah. Okay. Pippin the Short or Pippin the Great, yeah. And so he became the ruler of kind of that empire. Can you pull up, did you find a decent map of Charlemagne's empire by the time it would grow? Yeah, there we go. Okay, now we're looking at it. Okay, so Charlemagne is the first guy to show up on the scene since the fall of the Western Roman Empire who would try to rebuild it or try to put it back together, some form of an empire. He wouldn't call it the Roman Empire, but these are the fringes of his empire, which is pretty massive. Okay, that's very massive at the time. Obviously, for its day, it was the most powerful nation there, whatever you want to call it, nation, entity, faction, state, I don't know. But another thing about Charlemagne was he was extremely devoted to the Roman Catholic Church and to the Pope in particular. Pippin the Short, he would save the Pope down in Rome from the Lombards, and this is significant because this would become the standard, is that once Pippin saved them, the Pope then crowned Pippin as the king of the Frankish Empire, right? And at the time, there was kind of a split between, kind of like there was in Rome with the Senate and Caesar, and there was kind of like a joint power. Once the Pope crowned Pippin, Pippin became the king of the Franks, right? Charlemagne would also be considered the king of the Franks. This is one of the reasons why, if you know anything about history, Napoleon, what he did whenever it came time for him to be crowned as the Emperor of France, he took the crown from the Pope's pillow and put it on his own head because, you know, why not? Talk about power struggles. But anyways, every king of France would, from then until Napoleon, would be crowned by the Pope in Rome, okay? So, you know, I know as Americans, we're not too big on the French history there, but it is significant for there, and it's actually very significant for the life of the church during this time. When the Crusades are called, the majority of the crusading armies that would go are French, okay? The majority of those soldiers would be French soldiers. The one that gets all the notoriety that wasn't French, what's his name? The English guy that went on the Crusades. Come on, think Robin Hood. How about Richard? Yeah, Richard the Lionheart, yes, Third Crusade. Okay, anyways, so Charlemagne was huge in the unification of this area, and in particular, being sure that Roman Catholicism, that its power was absolutely solidified in those areas. He was very devout Roman Catholic, much as it would be known as during that time period, okay? He did, at some point, he did refer to himself as a Roman emperor, okay? But that is not Eastern, that's not the Byzantines, right? That's his kingdom. He decided, we rebuilt it ancient Rome, right? We rebuilt it, and here we go. Yeah. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever one you want to look at it, I don't know. When Charlemagne would die, within 2 generations, his empire would crumble back into segmented areas and would not make it, okay? So problem with monarchs, as we found out. It only lives as long as the king does. So these would be called the Carolingian. There's a, how do you pronounce that? Carolingian? Is it Carolingian? It's French, whatever. Carolingian rulers, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Their biggest contribution, honestly, is Charles Martel defeating the Muslims. Okay, remember that. All right. Charlemagne being crowned by the Pope, same as Pippin was. That happened. Okay. By the time we get to the 800s, right, the old territories of Rome are now divided into 3 areas, and church history of the area between 800 and 1054 is centered primarily on the struggle between the Pope and the ruler of the Frankish Empire. Okay? And then also, of course, we have what's going on in the east. Okay. Charlemagne's successors are very weak. We talked about that. Starts to fall apart. There is what is established as the Holy Roman Empire. It starts to show up during this time. Now, this is interesting. Something to remember about the Holy Roman Empire. Way to remember it, okay? It's neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Got it? Easy way to remember it. Essentially, it's a loose confederation of what would become German and North Italian states, right? And it would sometimes include parts of the Netherlands here with Frisia and Saxony and all that. But long story short, the way to describe it is difficult. Like it was like we're all together and we can all kill each other, but if someone tries to come kill you that's not part of this, we'll all get together and go kill them. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but yeah, kissing cousins that like to kill each other from time to time, okay? I can kill you, just no one else can kill you, okay? That's how that works. That's kind of a very poor explanation of what's going to become the Holy Roman Empire. There's also going to be a massive struggle set up with the Holy Roman Empire and Rome, and we'll talk about that. There's going to be the Pope and the anti-Pope and a couple popes at once type thing going on, but that's later on. Let's take it to about 1000 AD, or 800 to 1000 AD. Talked about all that territory being lost to Islam. The old territories of Rome are now divided into three. Those territories are the Frankish Empire, Italy, and the Eastern Empire, which at this point is beginning to hang on for dear life. Another thing that happened during Pippin's reign, real quick, this is very important. Pippin gave the papal state, okay? So in other words, now the Pope in Rome is his own nation and king and everything else. There is no jurisdiction there except for him, right? I remember whenever all that QAnon stuff was going on back in one of the crazy things, they said, oh yeah, someone's going to arrest the Pope. And I'm like, I don't know if there's anyone who's going to be able to arrest the Pope. I'm pretty sure those guys that guard him, you're going to have to kill them in order to get to him. Which, by the way, that happens too several times during this time period as they try to kill the Pope with the Pope and the anti-Pope and 2 or 3 popes. So the papal state will become its own thing. So the papal state is its own nation with its own laws, own rules. They submit to no one except for the Pope himself, right? So as you can imagine, that's going to lead to a lot of very bad things, right? Anytime that there's unchecked power, okay? Yes, still there today. In fact, well, there was an issue in 1870, I think it was, when Italy does something with them. When modern Italy formed, there was an issue, but it's still that way today, essentially. Here's a Okay. Speaking about Germany and across the Rhine, right? A guy by the name of Boniface was a evangelist. I say evangelist in the term of Roman Catholic evangelist, okay? He in particular is known as the apostle to the Germans, right? He started several monasteries, established several bishoprics, I guess that's the word there. In his 35 years in Germany, before going to France to reform the church there, okay? So Boniface is kind of the guy known as responsible for evangelizing much of the Germans, right? Germans. All right. But yeah, papal state is still a thing today. There's another little, is it on that map? No. Someone wants to find it. Right here, just above Provence, there's a little state that shows up too. Someone can find the name of it for me. I can't remember. But it's like a secondary home for the Pope later on. Say, put like papal state in southern France, question mark, and see what pops up. By the way, once the papal state becomes its own nation, they're then calling up their own armies for defense, right? So now the Pope is in charge of an army as well as crowning the kings of Europe. Avignon. Yeah, Avignon. Remember, it's French. See? Yeah, Avignon is right here, and it would become like a little safe haven at times for the Pope to get away from, right? Roman Catholicism is deeply rooted in the French, right? Hence our Louisiana mutts that we have that are still deeply rooted in Catholicism today. Yeah. Yeah, hey, I hear you back there. The- That's right. That's why they're parishes. That's right. Oui. Okay. But yeah, so obviously France would be a bastion for Roman Catholicism. And by the way, Spain, the reason why all of your Hispanics in South America and all that, the reason why they're all so deeply devoted to Roman Catholicism is because the Reconquista took place before the colonial time period. So those guys went through the Reconquista, they went through the Spanish Inquisition. Like, the Pope was not letting go of France, and the Pope was not letting go of Spain. And when those two colonial powers started to spread across the pond, everywhere they went, guess what went with them? Roman Catholicism. And it's still that way today, okay? So you see those things shaping and forming, and it makes the world as we know it, all right? Okay. Where are we at on time? 7 minutes. That's pretty good. Okay. Next week, fun part, Crusades. Okay? I'll go ahead and tell you I'm a bit of a sucker for the Crusades. All right? Were they Christ-like in any way? Nope. Are they really cool? Yeah. Okay? I think it is very easy for us in the world in which we live in, where Islam is not that big of a threat, comparatively speaking. It is very easy for us to look at the Crusades and absolutely condemn them without any reservation. I think if you lived in this world, pull up the jihad map again. I think if you lived in this world during the time when Islam is rapidly spreading via armies, I think it makes a whole lot of sense to put an army of Christians together to go fight that, right? I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Somebody's got to stop them, and no one individual nation was powerful enough to do it. But it turns out the Pope was, right? So, anyways, that's next week. We'll talk about the Crusades and the rise of the military orders. So we'll be talking about the Templars, the Hospitallers, all those fun guys that we hear all kinds of myths and legends about. Questions about any of this stuff today? We're through the Dark Ages officially after today. You say, Matt, that wasn't a whole lot of information about the Dark Ages. There's really not a whole ton of information about the Dark Ages, especially that's reliable. Because there's so much conquest and destruction going on all across the world. You got the Vikings, you got the Muslims, you even have Mongol invasions taking place in the east. And then, of course, with all that going on, you still have the bubonic plague ripping through Europe, even at these early stages, right? So survival is pretty difficult in Europe at this time. Yes?
This is during the Dark Ages, also that the Roman Catholic kept the word of God from the people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, yeah, and we'll get, obviously, that's leading up to the Reformation. But because the scriptures are hand transcribed, right, copied by hand, nobody gets to touch those. except for those who are in the church. Just the monks, just the bishops, just the pope, right? Nobody touches those. You don't get to take one home. And also it's during this time too that they're going to, like, they're not gonna get to read them. You believe what the priest tells you. If the priest says it, well, it must be there because he says it. And that's how we wind up with the things such as purgatory, and that's how we wind up with indulgences and all the great evil abuses that the Roman Catholic Church is going to do. Another thing that has happened during this time with the Pope, and Gregory was a big proponent of this, is infant baptism is now a means of salvation for all infants. So if your infant dies without being baptized, guess what? That infant's going to hell. So, you didn't want your infant going to hell, guess what you better do? You better get that baby down to the Roman Catholic monastery or church or whatever it was that was over there and go get them baptized. It's during the Dark Ages, and this is probably the most important part of the whole thing today. Salvation is completely taken out of the hands of Christ and put in the hands of the Roman Catholic Church. The Pope and the priests decide who is saved and who is not saved. Yes?
Pastor, do we know when the Pope became infallible?
Yeah, there's a date for that, for infallibility doctrine. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, they claim it, right? Let's see, papal infallibility.
Also Mary's,
Oh, the Ascension of Mary. Yeah, that's happened too by this time during the Dark Ages, where they say that Mary is, that she was immaculately conceived and also sinless and also ascended back into heaven, right?
co-redemptrix with Christ.
Yeah, the co-redeemer thing that just got repealed. Yeah, that too. That's going to be later on, though, I think. Give me just a minute here. What were we looking up? The infallibility of the Pope?
Hasn't happened, but
Yes.
they claim that it did.
Well, if you ask a Catholic priest or someone, if there's a discrepancy between Catholic tradition and the Bible, what do you lean more heavily on? They will say Catholic tradition.
Well, turns out that we're way off on the dates for that. The dates for papal infallibility starts in 1870. 1800s, yeah, that's way later. Which I guess that makes sense, because all these guys are killing each other and doing all kinds of evil things.
How did Islam spread? There were no modes of communication. So what are we talking about?
It spread via armies and conquest. It was not, Islam was not spread the way that Christianity was, right? Islam was spread by armies going and conquering, which has happened since the dawn of humanity, right? But as they conquered, they mandated conversion most of the time. You will convert or we will chop off your head. It's up to you. You becoming a Muslim today, start praying to Mecca right now. Okay? That's how it was spread. It was not spread by, like Christianity was with the missionaries and all these things. It was not spread that way. Yeah, it still is today, yeah. It's a little less spread today than it was 2 days ago. I'm sorry. Really not. Yeah,
Back about 25, 30 years ago, we established a ministry in the prisons of Florida.
yes.
Miami, and our Protestant service was right before the Catholic service. So I would stay for the Catholic service and listen to what the priest had to say. And eventually, one day, I stayed long enough that he would meet with me, and we went into the chaplain's office and we sat and we talked about that. And what Rebecca said was exactly what he said. Tradition is more important than the Bible. And I said, all right, thank you, goodbye.
Yeah, no, they do not like the sola scriptura. They to this day, they hate that saying, so.
So I have a friend who converted from Southern Baptist to Catholicism.
Oh, boy.
Met Mary husband in San Antonio. And I asked her, I remember when the Pope died back in 2007, 2008, I said, what is the Pope to you? And she said, well, he's the head of the church. That is only for Christ. And she said that, I don't know if she didn't recognize it, but it's very clear.
Another way Islam has spread so quickly, Regina, is Islam spreads through conquest, but they also spread through marriage. And this is still very true today. Muslim men are instructed to marry Christian women if possible and force convert them.
And then have as many babies as possible.
Yes, that too. Birth rate is huge.
We are killing ourselves off by not having enough babies.
Birth rate is a big deal for Islam. The reason why Islam is taking over Europe right now is birth rate. 100%. The average Muslim is having like 7 kids, and the non-Muslims are having like maybe 1. Yeah. And so within 3 generations, they're done. And you're seeing that already in England, right? Like England has some counties that are Sharia law. And yeah, if they don't stop it, like if they don't, it's going to take a civil war. Like they're going to have to fight it. And if they don't do it soon, they're not going to be able to win it.
Sharia law is higher than English law.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Yep. And part of it comes from them telling us that, oh, well, you're Islamophobic. It's like, well, no, I know history. I'm not scared of them. I just know that they're my enemy. There's a difference, right?
Well, it's also the weakening of the church that's happening there for decades.
Oh, yeah.
It's really a bastion of Christian faith. And it turned into Christian in name only.
Right. That's why the big debate's going on right now is did World War II, were the Allies really the winners or not? Because now they're as secular as Germany was at the start of the war. And now they're dealing with Islam. So it's a whole thing.
Sharia law,
Mhm.
did it come from Islam, or is it just like,
It's laid out in the Quran.
oh, is it?
And they're extra books that Michael referenced. It's the whole, if someone steals something, chop off their hand, and yeah, you got to wear the head coverings and all that stuff. Yeah, that's true. So
I always like watching people come in on, like in the mall, and women are covered from head, and the man looks like he just stepped out of GQ or something. It's like, wait,
what's going on? Yeah.
I know where you're from, so.
What you got, Mike?
You guys all have to understand that there's more than just one Islam. There's at least
Yeah, there's 2 or 3. Yeah.
one big one, or 2 big ones, Sunni and Shia.
Yeah.
And they all have their different ways of doing things. And so when it comes to quote unquote Sharia law, they all have their own different Sharia law.
Yeah. But they still believe that Sharia law should be the law of the land everywhere.
Yeah, and there's nothing that we want.
Right. No. Yeah. There's no good form of Sharia law.
And there's no non-passionate or zealot Islam.
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
moderate Islamic, or the moderate Muslim is the one holding you while the other guy's down.
That's right. Yes, Gary.
Do you believe that it's spreading here right now by marriage?
Yes, absolutely. I know of at least 2 people that have married into Islam and have either converted or had to get out before they were killed.
Which is crazy to me. Why would a woman ever choose Islam? Ever?
It's pretty stupid. It's pretty stupid.
It's like the original Quran. Regardless of all the hadiths and all these other books that will comment on the Quran, the Quran itself says that a woman is not a person. It's
Yeah.
a prophet.
Yeah, exactly. So the scripture, the Bible withstands any test you put it to, right? You can look at morality today, and the only thing that even comes close is slavery, and that's a whole different topic. And I can make it. We could do that with the Bible, and I can still stand on the scripture at the end of the day. You cannot do that with Islam. You cannot do that with Islam when it comes to pedophilia. You cannot do it with Islam whenever it comes to women's rights or the value of women, the idea of people being, being valued because they're created in the image of God. It doesn't withstand any of those. And by the way, it also doesn't withstand any textual criticism, right? Like what we're talking about as far as how reliable our scripture is, the Quran is nowhere close. You're separated by hundreds of years. Doesn't work. And it doesn't make sense anyways. So what do you do with that? By the way, one thing that Muhammad did say was that the way he got the Quran was an angel of light appeared to him and said, here you go. Just anytime an angel of light appears to you, just be careful. It's probably Satan, okay?
On that note, the one group that they're not allowed to proselytize or convert are the Mormon Church.
Is it really? Is that true?
No,
Muslims? How about that?
Joseph Smith was very, very, had a natural affinity towards
Muhammad? Huh?
and he actually
Who knew?
he actually started just like him, going to town and say, hey, you're gonna go to my God, because
Yeah.
until the United States government got involved, and then they started being all these peaceful people. Then when the U.S. government got involved,
But
they
they,
shut it down.
but they still kept the, the marrying children and the, polygamy and all those other things, yeah.
Very, very similar belief systems.
But if you look where they go on their missions, it's not Christian.
No, yeah, no. No. Yep. And just so you know, that, what you see up on the screen there, all that's in what's modern day called, we call it the 1040 window. Longitude, latitude, 10 and 40, it's still closed off to Christianity today. You cannot go there and preach the gospel without fear of persecution or death. Okay? So, understand this has been around since late 600 AD, right? So, 700 AD, 732, Battle of Tours, all that. So, would not expect it to change anytime soon.
And yet, we have brothers and sisters in Christ there.
Yes.
There are missionaries there, and then there are Christians there who are willing to die for them.
Yep.
So,
It's still important. Yeah. Still important. All right. Now we've gone over time. All right. Ray, you want to dismiss us?